Avowed is a decent game. If you liked late 2000s role-playing games like the BioWare Golden Age, or even if you liked New Vegas or the mechanical parts of the Outer Worlds, you'd probably like Avowed. I have a second channel video about the launch, otherwise this is going to be me mostly talking about the leveling and magic system. Avowed's intro is really long, although the bigger issue it had for the game was that it's not trusting. It's like being given a bike but not being allowed to take off the training wheels until you're 13 years old. This game is very careful about making sure, oh, baby, are you sure you can handle dodging? I know you can animation cancel everything, and it has ample iframes, but really, we don't want to overwhelm you. I'd hate to use the "it gets better after 40 hours" argument, so I won't. But there is a tangible point near the end of the first zone when the game finally trusts the player can breathe autonomously. People in my community have recently taken to calling Microsoft the publisher of dad games, and I can see why. For example, there are these status effects that can be applied environmentally. So, frost on water makes a platform, electricity can power things, fire can burn objects, you get the idea. Nothing new, but cool to see the idea in more games, right? I mean, if gaming has gone downhill in the last 10 to 15 years, then you have to climb past where you have been to get back to where you were. There are also plants you can find that give you throwable objects that mimic these effects in case you can't cast magic, and that's fine in moderation. But Avowed doesn't do moderation. Every single time without fail that I was expected to engage with the system, there would be a handy little plant nearby to make sure I couldn't somehow softlock myself. The game never trusts me to realize I should carry spares in case I go into a dungeon and there won't be plants there to bail me out. It's a lot of stuff like that, except illusions. Illusions show up in the third area and can only be dismissed by a single party member, yes, it's that one, but they don't block progress unless she was already going to be a required companion anyways, like for her specific quest. It's dumb, and randomly not in unity with other aspects of the game, which appears to be Avowed's design motto. The puzzles in general are made for babies. I can at least praise the game because the companions rarely shout out the puzzle solutions. But yeah, this game has an issue trusting players, meaning for anybody more intellectually capable than the average Starfield diehard fan, it can take over 10 hours to reach the point where the game lets you actually struggle, at least as much as it's willing to. I hope this design philosophy is going away. Like, now that there is a tangible risk to your launch that having a poor intro can cause, maybe game devs will be willing to take more risks. Like, is it worth it to make sure that DSP can complete your game at the cost of not pushing many sales? I do think that past all the grifting that went on surrounding the game's launch, the start of the game is Avowed's actual biggest issue in finding a meaningful player base that will actually talk about this game in 5 years. First impressions matter, and game devs have become so scared of players getting angry and never playing the game again, that they have made games that are so boring many people watching on a live stream will not check it out for themselves, when they may actually enjoy aspects of this game. The first area is also not particularly impressive. I liked each area I visited more than the previous, barring the awful fake Italian accents in the second area, but they were the ones who chose how this stuff would get laid out, so it's their fault they open with the most boring stuff first. Levels in Avowed are split up in two ways: player progression and gear progression. It's honestly crazy how well this system worked, and how it solved many issues RPGs like the Outer Worlds had, but also the sheer amount of effort that must have went into implementing it. The idea is certainly not original. In fact, I could probably say that a worrying number of times about this game. I don't think it's plagiarism, but it's definitely an issue when people's standards surrounding originality are so weird. Still, copying an idea and implementing an idea are two different things. Even if it's not original, the idea is still done in such a way to encourage interesting decision-making and planning in gear progression. And that is due to how tightly controlled the flow of items is, or was. Avowed is a pseudo-open world, meaning that you do get free reign of the starter map, but you unlock new areas rather than getting free access to go everywhere. And it's fine. It's leaning into a style the Outer Worlds had, but to even better effect since there are more areas and one of the 3 planets doesn't look like the canyon walls are made of feces. All of the enemies in Avowed have intentionally set levels, just done through abstraction via this tier system. So rather than facing a level 20 enemy, you face a tier 4 enemy, and I guess there is a deeper system, like it's not tier 4, it's superb tier plus 2 or whatever. So you can't do very much damage to people that are higher tier, but this is tied to your gear, not your level. Traditionally, you'd have the same thing. A level 16 enemy would numerically have so much health that a level 4 weapon would be weak against them. So you would need to find a weapon that requires level 16. Now it's the same thing, but the decisions I'm making are more nuanced because I can focus on what an item is and choosing to upgrade that, rather than what the item's arbitrary level is. It's a very tightly tuned experience. I've been told they buffed the post-release numbers, so I guess I get to add played with pre-release Avowed upgrade system to my gamer resume because boy was this a tight fit. Not difficult, but I always felt like I was at the right place the entire game to make interesting choices related to my gear. The way it works is materials upgrade into future tiers, so you can comb the current area trying to squeeze out one more upgrade, or you could run around underpowered in a high tier area trying to scrounge around to get your gear back up to snuff. It also meant that items became decisions whether I wanted to scrap them for materials or sell them for money to buy different materials I needed. I liked it. It's been a while since I played an RPG that had an economy where I wasn't so overwhelmingly wealthy that I could just buy out merchants in new areas upon arrival. But then again, I've leaned more towards being a survival crafting fan lately than an RPG fan. I'm sure if you're used to Daedric swords just showing up after level 35, you'd probably find it arbitrary that you need flowers to make your sword do more damage. The game was able to work without level requirements on items, but also have full confidence that powerful items could be powerful without fear of a low-level player getting it and becoming bored with the game. Because designers don't really care if you run around with an OP item, they care if you get bored and then tell other prospective customers that the game is boring. It also meant I occasionally had to leave encounters because I was too low tier, but I was usually not too far behind that it was uncomfortable. There's a lot of tuning that had to go into making the system work, and I am impressed with the output. Even if they are copying stuff from 2018, when they started working on Avowed's pre-production. The biggest thing that peeved me about this system specifically, there were a lot of minor things that peeved me in Avowed, was that unique items have their tier determined by your current items. So if you rush to upgrade, future unique items will also be upgraded. Unique items are broken down into Audra, which is used to upgrade between tiers, so getting more up-tier Audra sooner snowballs how quickly you can upgrade. It tempted me to restart, but people found this out when I already had like 18 hours in the game, so I didn't. Still, it's novel, and I was theory crafting builds in my head while playing using unique items I saw but wasn't built towards at the time. I was doing a spell duelist build using a one-handed sword, pistol, and learned magic. I ended on a pure magic build thanks to skill point refinancing, which, while seeming cheap, was definitely a budgetary hit at the time when I was maximizing all of my money towards upgrading items. But it does inherit a problem from Outer Worlds, which is that you can't build around a weapon that shows up 75% of the way into a game, especially not uniques that show up in the final area after the point of no return. This game doesn't have New Game Plus. Put in a layer of New Game Plus so people can build craft around all of the items in the game. Instead, I am deleting my unique items to buff up a couple so I won't be able to recover or mess around with build crafting them without starting completely over. It's just a shame. It's an interesting system that's trapped inside this game. So the set that's at the start of the Morrowind video was actually going to be a 3D set for a series I wanted to do, reviewing different games' magic systems, since I seem to be in the minority of people who care about such things on YouTube. The magic system in Avowed is alright. Frustrating at times, poorly thought out in some respects. Okay, let's start with the basics, the wand. This is the generic left-click damage dealer which consumes stamina. It's not really magic per se, and Avowed is not shy about allowing the player to be a gun mage if they wanted to. Wand is powerful enough. I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up being the most powerful build in the game. This is because it has fairly powerful effects that can be unlocked around giving the wand more area damage through power attacks. The problem is it's boring. At least when I was using a sword and pistol, I had to balance my offense and defense. With the wand, I'm spamming the left mouse button and waiting for stamina to recharge in between spellcasts. It felt like wands were included as a filler to give a pure wizard something thematically relevant to do on cooldown, and then made powerful to compensate for it not really being the most mechanically interesting playstyle. Where magic shines is in its actual spells, so let's get into that. Spells come from grimoires, which all have 4 spells each. You need a grimoire to learn a spell, but can then purchase that spell in the perk screen. Having a rank in a spell and casting it with the book at the same time upranks the spell, so you can balance out the perk point requirements with not needing to upgrade some spells past rank 2 or even 1, as long as you have the grimoire. I like the idea, but I want to know who endeavored to make every grimoire in this game flawed with no mechanism to make a custom spellbook. I assume the lack of custom spellbooks is to incentivize using the unique ones, but the unique ones don't do anything unique like other weapons. They have no enchantment or a custom stat line, which is a double-edged sword because it means generic grimoires can and are more viable than the unique ones. This leaves you at the mercy of the game's spell list, which is, the spell list is a mixture of sometimes near useless to middling to amazing spells, and trying them out was fun. The nice thing is that level 1 spells don't lose value because they often still fill niches at higher levels. Like, Chill Blades is a decent low-cost spell for shooting a distant target quickly. This isn't like a certain other spell system where low-tier spells are just replaced. I found tinkering with magic in the run to be fun, less as a dedicated wizard and more as somebody who was really good at a single spell, like Fireball. Crackling Bolt became really powerful though, as it increases the number of targets it bounces between per rank, and those bounces still happen even if there are no other targets. The leveling system also meant that reaching the point I could access new spells was exciting, even if the spells sometimes weren't. Like, Meteor Storm isn't a particularly great spell, at least when I was using it. The spells are a weird mixture. Sometimes the upgrades just impact scalable stat increases, like doing more damage or costing less essence. Other times functionality will change. For example, Freezing Pillar summons a big chunk of ice and drops it on a spot. If you upgrade it, that chunk of ice sticks around and lingers, doing frost accumulation. And if it gets attacked, it explodes, doing explosive damage. That's a lot of functionality being squeezed into what could have just been a generic damage spell. I think it's a good step, but still not really what I want fully out of a magic system. I think the limiting factor is unironically other playstyles. See, it was not lost on me that there were enough points to be invested in roughly 5 spells and a main weapon type as a wizard. I think the number of spells was gated partially by what they could implement, and balanced to make sure there are just as many to invest in as perks in the other trees. In other words, magic is balanced so melee doesn't get jealous again. Because there are a lot more spells in the Pillars of Eternity list, but I'm not too salty about it. Once I knew what I liked, switching to Pure Wizard was interesting. You have to make the most of your cooldowns, positioning, targeting, which complements the style of gameplay Avowed has. Since companions do so little damage, we're the main damage dealer of the party, we have to prioritize things like targeting and enemy takedown order, which in turn affects your spell list as you want different spells for different situations. And of course, this is a hybrid leveling system, so magic can also work to fill the gaps in other builds. I thought it was fine. Spell cost essence, which is a non-regenerating magic source. Potions are plentiful, and there are additional restorative options, so I wouldn't really say it's a major gameplay consideration. It mostly gates how quickly you can spam spells, in addition to the cooldown system, which I do think is kind of disappointing. I can understand the trepidation surrounding being the one tasked with balancing essence restoratives so that the system is interesting without going over the line and risking players running out. But the amount of restoratives is so high that it makes upgrades related to it an actual waste. I feel like the balance should have been thrown in favor of essence drinks being more common than potions, but with the current balance of potions being the faster option in combat. That way I'm using potions only if I'm in the middle of a fight. I'm out of essence, and it doesn't look like we're stopping anytime soon. But instead, I'm practically tripping over potions, and I had to remove the perk that gave me more essence after fights because I was just straight up stopped using potions for several hours when I had it. I'm going to go through the rest of my thoughts as I'm pressed for time, and as interesting as Avowed is, it doesn't merit a full video at this time. I'm not sure what the title means, or who the character on the cover is supposed to be. The title doesn't really apply to anything in the game in the modern definition, so maybe it's supposed to be the Middle English definition where we are the approved Imperial Envoy by the Emperor. Same with the main cover guy. I'm not sure who this is supposed to be, and I've beaten the game. It is kind of sad people concede this is probably AI art, like a human isn't capable of illustrating this. I feel like AI being invoked by non-artists is the art equivalent of when people say something was so crazy the writer must have been on psychedelics when he wrote it. No, I think your mind is so rotten out from gooning to anime girls that you have forgotten that people can just draw whatever if they want or are paid to. Death Guard are established as people being too devoted to die, and we meet one that is obviously a skeleton person early on, so I assumed John Avowed on the cover was us at some point, justifying why we died upon our arrival to the first city. Like, now our corpse is rotting and we slowly turn into a skeletal mushroom man throughout the game. We're already a mushroom person, because we are a godlike. Godlike are beings in this universe touched by the gods, marked with unusual features, with the big mystery being who our god is, as we bear our natural growths on our face compared to having, like, golden skin. You can hide the growths, but NPCs still remark on it because this is obviously a transmog option for the fashion players. There are a lot of things in Avowed that I feel like we're trying to break the rules us video review people like to write. Like, someone was watching Skyrim videos and said, "Oh, being the Dragonborn is bad, huh? What if I did it but made it more interesting?" Like, it's not out of spite. I often hear people saying things like you should never do X, and find myself thinking about ways that you could make doing X work. And being the Dragonborn wasn't a bad thing, but how the main story tries to force you into the role when so much of the game works without that extra baggage. So, here we are. We don't get an option. There's no blending in. We are obviously the main character, with features that clearly indicate to others as such. And it's interesting because some people find it off-putting that we have mushrooms growing out of our face, especially given the ongoing mushroom growing out of face zombie apocalypse. I think it works considering the linear structure of the game. If it was an open-world exploration game, then it wouldn't, because there's not really a way to have the player grow into being a godlike later on. But yeah, we don't turn into the skeleton mushroom man, and now I want to know the story because I played somewhat comprehensively and I never found John Avowed. Was it maybe a goal and it just didn't pan out? Combat AI changes based on difficulty. People will say this is cope, but I tried the same encounter on all difficulties and did find the AI was more responsive and aggressive on the higher ratings. I think the highest level, Path of the Damned, is tuned pretty well, and I'm not the only person I've seen who thinks so. I'm impressed the difficulty didn't just come down to paddle spam. That said, I think people get confused on this topic. Inflatable health pools are just part of an RPG formula because it gives you more levers to control combat flow. The enemy health bars grow, but if you fight at the same tier as an enemy, then the time to kill is still fairly quick. The added health bar padding is just there to take more stamina per kill, which in turn adds more to the risk-reward mental calculations you're doing to decide how aggressively you want to play. But the difficulty mostly came from how fragile I, or probably my build, was. I'd say you can't really treat Avowed like it's going to be a difficult experience. POTD is there to stop you from just steamrolling the entire game, not to serve as an Elden Ring expansion. It's a fairly trivial game once you learn some cheese, like how you can back dodge into walls pretty much infinitely. The AI can punish dodge spam, but only if you run out of stamina. It's really only a challenge in groups where you can get overwhelmed, but most of the encounters are built around outnumbering the player. I think the designers correctly guessed that they could not make an engaging system around the 1v1 duel, so they went for a more chaotic system. And enemies have good unit compositions, priests that can heal, rangers that serve to deal damage while melee fighters hold the line, units move around to make sure the weaker fighters are in the rear, you have to rush the priests first because they heal faster than you can do damage, and the AI doesn't always make that the easiest thing. Even being aggressive and trying to spam a priest to death can end up being punished if you run out of stamina. So I just summoned an iceberg on top of them. There is a vignette on stealth that disappears when you jump or fall, so I doubt I'll ever do a stealth build just because of how annoying it is to have that vignette flash because I was falling for a microsecond. The companions are a bit weird. You can't control or upgrade their equipment, which was my favorite part of managing companions in the Outer Worlds. I feel like whoever tuned equipment said they could only do it if the player was the only person who uses it, because it would be too difficult to balance it if they have to account for companions existing and the player potentially choosing not to upgrade their gear. As a result, the companions do static amounts of damage and your biggest lever is controlling their perks, which There is a refinancing cost for it, but it's so trivial, like, at no point is 50 gold a burdensome cost. Either make it free or make it more. The companion spread is also meh. Kai is the best, so B's the first. He's voice acted by someone who did another big RPG companion character. I won't name who, and I encourage others not to as well, because I think Kai stands on his own outside of just being guy whose voice I recognize from other game. The companion rollout is slow, though. We get a second to help track down who killed us, and then he just sticks around. He talks like we're paying him, but we had no conversation about that topic. He just tags along with us the entire game just so he can complain about how boring he finds anything more complicated than being a hunter-gatherer. He was honestly done dirty. Later zones his outlook makes a lot more sense because they are appropriately dangerous as to need a guide, but he acts like an anchor the entire game until you get to replace him 10 hours later. Giada is one of the Black Italians you might have heard about. It's not random, they are a colony of ex-members of a faction with the same setup. The bad accents is the most offensive part, otherwise it's hardly more woke than, I don't know, half of rural 1890s Scotland being vaguely ethnic. And the last one is the pink furry sex addict lady. She's married though, so I don't know if you can have sex with her. I will say that you might find her premise annoying, and her shtick is, but she's not a millennial line delivery machine. Like, she serves an actual role beyond what her character design might indicate. Companions were annoying, but in ways companions were annoying before 2018. Like, this guy is a Luddite tryhard, but he doesn't break the pacing of the story to do his cringy bits. His camp dialogue is weird though, like there's big sections of it that seem outright missing. I have to wonder if someone's job for the last year has been to take a chainsaw to dialogue cringe, or if he's just poorly implemented. There's a UI element to indicate when companions have camp dialogue, and it's the only element that stays on screen when everything else disappears. So I just have this indicator on screen at all times that Giada or Yatsley or this guy is gonna nag me about some story decision I made 5 minutes ago. It was really funny because when I wrote down this problem, the nagging in question that followed was a scripting error, where the game accredited me making a different decision than I had. I didn't notice too many story bugs, but it is funny to get praised for making a decision I didn't after being annoyed at what I knew was going to be a nagging session. It is nice to have companions that are written such that you can generally guess whether they'll approve of a decision prior to speaking with them. And on nuanced topics, more than just existing to tongue lash the player for making unapproved decisions, although that does happen, obviously. But the camp dialogues did wear on me. It's a novel solution to me neurotically doing laps around the Normandy to make sure everyone's dialogue is exhausted after every mission, but just have it only show up when the combat UI is out. As for the narrative, time always tells if there are substantive decisions or not. That said, they do let a city potentially get destroyed, and you can miss out on quests as a result. Some of this is due to bugs, like not finding certain NPCs in the wild who decide to not let you rescue them after. But you can also apparently prevent this, which is cool. I like that decisions pay forward and can make convincing people later down the road more difficult. I just think that what with the development hell this game went through, they probably didn't nail the execution. But I like the final 3 areas, and the final battle is more than 10 people, with lots of returning characters from prior quests and payoffs. This ending sequence tries, which is why starting a game with so much bait for anti-woke inquisitors was obviously not the play. So yeah, obviously it's not New Vegas, but I doubt many people singing praise of how goated New Vegas is remember it accurately. Either because they haven't played it in a long time, or if they had so many mods they don't know what the game really is anymore. Given people post bait like, why isn't the Outer Worlds talked about anymore, I'm sure Avowed will draw an annoying fan base of people who don't see the game's flaws, which are fewer than the Outer Worlds, and also probably won't be able to articulate the means by which this game was absolutely murdered in the public perception. I don't think it deserved the red carpet treatment or to be awarded a 10 out of 10 by everyone in gaming. But a fair chance to have its issues actually discussed rather than taken out of context for cheap engagement is really all I wanted for this game. And I do think this game at least deserved more nuanced conversations about its systems and story than what it ended up receiving. I would have given it more time, but I have a fairly tight deadline as there are certain things I need to do before a certain date. Ideally, what I'm cutting the Avowed video short for will end up being big content for the channel, but in the interim I had to cut making this video short so I could focus on preparing. I did challenge myself to make something in 30 days. I was initially interested in Avowed because of the flintlock, believe it or not. I didn't realize until like a few days before it came out that it had pistols, and that meant you could do a Dishonored build. I wasn't expecting a whole lot, except maybe to get some stream time on it, but when I saw how the game was absolutely getting mauled online for reasons that it didn't deserve, especially after enduring the Outer Worlds, which did not get mauled enough, I decided I had to at least say something about it. Anyways, I kind of stopped doing side videos because they weren't as much fun anymore, which is, I think, kind of the vibe the video analysis genre has gone through since pretty much everyone is in a content drought. Anyways, Fallout videos doing well.